If we could please just close our eyes and say a prayer before we pick up the reading. Dear God, please enable us to set aside everything we think we know about A Course in Miracles, about you, about ourselves, and about others. God, please enable us to have an open mind for a new experience with A Course in Miracles, you, ourselves, and others. We ask this in your name. Amen. I love you. Thank you. Hello, we are in Chapter 1 of A Course in Miracles. Text based on the original handwritten notes of Helen Schuckman, the complete and annotated edition by Circle of Atonement, edited by Robert Perry. We are on Miracle Principle number 36 in Chapter 1, page 28. Miracles are examples of right thinking. Through miracles, reality contact at all levels becomes strong and accurate, thus permitting correction, delineation of intrapersonal and interpersonal boundaries. 74. Reality contact refers to being in touch with reality as opposed to one's own fantasies and illusions. Psychosis, for instance, is marked off by a loss of reality contact. According to the reference here, by making possible strong reality contact, miracles allow us to correctly delineate internal boundaries, perhaps the boundary between body and spirit, or the boundary between the roles of the conscious, superconscious, and subconscious, and external boundaries, perhaps appropriate physical, mental, and emotional boundaries between ourselves and others, or the boundary between what we are responsible for and what others are responsible for. This reality contact eventually becomes so strong that we can see ultimate reality, the truth as God created it. So I'm going to start over because it's not. Through miracles, reality contact at all levels becomes strong and accurate, thus permitting correct delineation of intrapersonal and interpersonal boundaries. As a result, the doer sees the truth as God created it. This is what is meant by the principle on perspective adjustment. And we're going to read 75. A miracle rearranges the order of perception and places the levels in their true perspective. 37. A miracle is a correction factor introduced into false thinking by me. It acts as a catalyst, shaking up erroneous perception and snapping it into place. This correction factor places you under the atonement principle, where your perception is healed. Until this has occurred, perception of the divine order is impossible. True depth perception becomes possible only at the highest order of perceptual integration. 76. This sentence involves the reinterpretation of two different conventional terms. Perceptual integration normally refers to the organizing and integrating of different sensory stimuli. Here, however, it refers to the organizing and integrating of our perception of those stimuli. For example, our interpretations and our thoughts. Only when this integration has taken place can we achieve true depth perception. This is clearly not visual depth perception, but perception of reality at depth, perception of the divine order. A similar remark in the dictation for Chapter 4 treats seeing in the longer range, a concept related to depth perception, as symbolic of experiencing knowledge. 38. The spiritual eye is the mechanism of miracles because what the spiritual eye perceives is true. And 77. The spiritual eye is what will later be called the eyes of Christ, a spiritual faculty in us that is able to see the truth beyond physical appearances. The spiritual eye perceives both the creations of God and the products of human beings. Among the latter, it can also separate the true from the false by its ability to perceive totally rather than selectively. It thus becomes the proper instrument for reality testing, which always involves the necessary distinction between the true and the false. Reality testing means checking your perceptions against reality and adjusting your perceptions accordingly. 39. The miracle dissolves error because the spiritual eye identifies error as false or unreal. This is the same as saying that by seeing light, darkness automatically disappears. Darkness is lack of light. It does not have unique properties of its own. It is an example of the scarcity fallacy from which only error can proceed. 79. The scarcity fallacy is the idea that we are lacking inside. We try to fill this lack with things from outside, such as food. Scarcity here then my dog's pushing me, excuse me. Scarcity here then does not refer to lack of material prosperity, but rather to the inner emptiness that fuels the search for outer prosperity. She doesn't like that I'm not paying attention to her. Truth is always abundant. Scarcity leads to overeating and other false drives. Abundance eliminates these. Those who perceive and acknowledge that they have everything have no need for driven behavior of any kind. 40. Miracles are a blessing from parents to children. This is another way of phrasing the earlier principle about those who have more for those who have less. 80. Miracles are a form of healing. They supply a lack and are performed by those who have more for those who have less. Children do not belong to parents, but they do need to share their parents' greater abundance. If they are deprived, their perception becomes distorted. When this occurs, the whole family of God or the sonship is impaired in its relationships. Ultimately, every member of the family of God must return. The miracle calls to him to return because it blesses and honors him, even though he may be absent in spirit. Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And lastly, I think we're supposed to read through 41. Yes. 41. The miracle acknowledges all men as your brothers and mine. 82. All Men Are Brothers is a 14th century Chinese novel made famous in America by the 1933 translation by Pearl S. Buck. There are two other probable references to this book title in the course, which makes us confident that this is a genuine reference. The miracle acknowledges all men as your brothers and mine. It is a way of perceiving the universal mark of God in them. 83. Ezekiel 9:4. And the Lord said to him, Go through the city, through Jerusalem, and put a mark upon the foreheads of the men who sigh and groan over all the abominations that are committed in it. The mark of God here is to be placed on the foreheads of those who reject idolatry, plus marking them as gods and saving them from the coming wrath. In the Course's reference, it is a mark possessed by everyone, which is seen via the miracle. The mark of God may also be a reference to the mark of Cain, Genesis 4:15, which marked him as a murderer of his brother Abel, and as someone cursed and shunned. This, at least, is how the mark of Cain has come to be seen. If so, the above passage would then be contrasting the true universal mark, a sign of sonship, that everyone possesses with the mark that set Cain apart from all others. This is the true strawberry mark of brotherhood, 84. The strawberry mark refers to the literary plot. Sorry, my dog. Let me try again. The strawberry mark refers to the literary plot device in which a long-lost son or brother is identified as part of the family by means of his strawberry mark, a raised red birthmark. This device was used in Mozart's opera, The Marriage of Figaro, which happened to be a favorite of Bill's. Indeed, this comment was originally addressed to Bill as a sign of special concern for him. Your false idea about your own exclusion from universal love is both fallacious and arrogant. Your real specialness does not stem from exclusion, but from inclusion. All my brothers are special. You should stop interpreting this as all except me. This is ridiculous. The implied lack of love that this version contains is way off the mark and misses the level of right thinking entirely. Off the mark is a pun referring to the earlier statement that a miracle is a way of perceiving the universal mark of God in them. This pun was another special sign of love to Bill, who loved puns, and to whom this material was directed. It means that his lack of love toward himself failed to recognize the mark of God in himself, and was thus literally off the mark. You must heal your perception in this respect. You must work a miracle on behalf of yourself here. See the principle about miracles as perception correctors, 86, Principle 37. So you must heal your perception in this respect. You must work a miracle on behalf of yourself here before you can extend miracles as creative energizers, which they are. 50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong because the notion is too fragmented. What can't be wrong is the universal sonship of which you are a part. God is not mocked, may arouse anticipation of punishment, but it is really a reassurance, 88, and I missed 87, I'm sorry. Fragmented, it's after fragmented. 50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong because the notion is too fragmented. And that's a reference to the 1927 song, 50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong, which compared that era's free Parisian attitudes with American prohibition and censorship. This sentence was originally directed at Bill. Tell Bill that 50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong, and means that even if millions of people shared Bill's belief in being excluded from universal love, it still wouldn't be true. And then 88, what can't be wrong is the universal sonship of which you are a part. Galatians 6:7, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. In the Bible verse, God is not mocked because his prejudiced will have the last word. If you break his laws, you will pay. In the Course's reinterpretation, God is not mocked because his creation of you will have the last word. No matter how sinful you appear to become, you cannot change the holiness he created in you. God would be mocked if any of his creations lacked holiness. The creation is whole. The mark of wholeness is holiness, not holes. The sonship has no holes anywhere. 89. The reference to holes in contrast to wholeness is yet another pun for Bill's sake. It refers to Bill's belief that where his place in the sonship should have been, there was just a hole. Remember, God is not mocked under any circumstances. And that is where we will stop before we get to 42. And I will now read Emily's writing from the Course Companions on the Facebook page. When I first read Principles 36 and 37, I told Robert they were points on the board for defining miracles as a shift in perception. Up until now, miracles have been defined exclusively as expressions of love. This is where it's helpful to think of miracles as internal and external in the sense that external miracles, behavioral expressions of love, are primary, and internal miracles, internal shifts in perception, are secondary. Both are important, but the Course places more emphasis on miracles as love-centered interpersonal action in the world. As we learned in Cameo 5, the Shield Report, an internal shift in perception is not a prerequisite for expressing love to others. And yet we are asked to keep ourselves in a miracle-ready state for those times when love is needed to flow through us. Indeed, Principle 36 notes that we all have the ability to see the truth as God created it as long as we are doers of miracles. This focus on doing echoes the emphasis we've seen on action throughout the text thus far, despite the fact that this principle is seemingly about right thinking. Spiritual eye, Principle 38, is the faculty that allows us to see ultimate reality, while at the same time experiencing the reality of the world in which we live. I love that the spiritual eye is referred to as the proper instrument versus being a gift, because instruments require effort to master. It takes a lot of willingness to run scales in order to play Beethoven with confidence, and it appears the same idea applies to spiritual vision. Our spiritual eye has been closed for so long that it takes practice to open it. Here's a note from Robert on Spiritual Principle 30, on Miracle Principle 39. There is an interesting chain of logic here. The spiritual eye sees the light. This dissolves error because error is darkness. Darkness is not something, it is just lack of light. So when you are in darkness, you are in lack. You are lacking. This leads to driven behaviors to fill that lack within. The example given being overeating, thus dispelling darkness. Miracles also dispel lack. We become aware again of the abundance within us, and as a result, we naturally stop engaging in those driven behaviors. It's interesting that overeating is the example used here because I suffered from a compulsive food disorder in college, and the Course was a huge factor in my complete healing. Google Emily Bennington plus food addiction for more if you're interested in this topic. I refer to my path in the articles as mindfulness, but it was really the Course that brought me home by waking me up to the inherent wholeness I was trying to fill with food. There were many times I stood at the refrigerator and asked myself if I was going to be host to God or hostage to the ego in that moment. Once I knew that I was already complete, the compulsive behavior fell away. I was so plagued by this disorder for years at university, and then one day it was just gone. Such is the power of this work. On Principle 40, I can't say it better than Robert does. Parents are meant to be more aware of their inner abundance and then to pass this on to their children through expressions of love. When parents don't do this, their children are deprived and their perception becomes distorted. They become psychologically unhealthy, and when that happens, the whole family of God is impaired. Robert's words perfectly summarize why spiritual growth is so critical to this area of our lives. For example, we can't pass on to our children something we don't have ourselves. In Principle 41, when Jesus says the miracle acknowledges all men as your brother and mine, it is a way of perceiving the universal mark on God in them. What he means is that everyone has the universal mark of God. This isn't a distinction reserved for a chosen few who are deemed worthy. Everyone means everyone. Do you see others with this level of spiritual vision? Jesus does, and he's calling you to do the same. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, listener, for joining with me. I love you. Until tomorrow, thank you.